Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Hey guys, here I am back in the garage again. Another nighttime video. Late night, it's about 10 minutes after 2 in the morning. So I'm trying to talk a little quieter because there's, I think, neighbors upstairs. Or above my head, I should say. I think that's their bedroom. Very odd night in a way. On the late evening of Friday the 13th, I attempted to record a video here in the garage, and have never had technically a problem with this particular computer that I record them on before. I did an entire video. I saw it was recording. I saw the little countdown meter, everything. And when I was done recording, I went and the file was empty. It was just like the file existed, but there was nothing in it. And I thought, wow, that's weird. That's never happened with this computer. And I saw the thing recording. Very strange. And it was Friday the 13th, but kind of not really, because it was 2 a.m., so technically it was Saturday the 14th, though in other parts of the U.S. here and on the West Coast, technically it still was Friday the 13th. So that was weird. But the problem with that is, and I don't know if this has happened to any of you, if you ever recorded a video where something like that happened before you could post it and you lost the video, or for some reason you didn't want to post it because you didn't like the way it came out or something. And then the problem is, I guess because I didn't go back and attempt to do it right away, I didn't forget what I was talking about. But in my mind, I was kind of combining, when I got ready to record this video, I was like recalling what I said on that video, but also in my previous video, which did get posted. So I'm like, oh, I should talk about this or that album, and I'm like, oh no, but that one was in the one that did get posted prior to that. So I'm a little confused as to, I did mention a few, I think, Tangerine Dream albums that I've been playing that weren't usual Halloween listens, because I've been on this Halloween kick, as you guys know if you regularly watch, that this time of year I always listen to a lot of very specific albums that I associate with Halloween. And it's a seasonal thing. I mean, I also do that in the summertime, in the wintertime as well. I have specific albums and artists that I'm always spinning, during that specific time of year. I always get that desire to hear them then. It's not even like a contrived thing, like I'm thinking, oh, it's summertime, let me go pull out those Wes Montgomery albums I always listen to. I just get the desire to hear them, and it's always in the same season. So I think I brought a few of those. But I'm confused as to which ones now, and I know some of the ones that I thought I had shown, in this video that I lost, actually was in my prior video that did get posted. That was done about a week before that. So I'm confused about, what exactly I did or didn't cover. I knew I had brought out a bunch of CDs that I don't typically associate with Halloween, but I started to listen to, and more than just once, in this period that could potentially become future Halloween listens. But I didn't bring them out this time. And, I've got, a few videos. I'm going to hope to record some more videos before Halloween, so I'm going to have all that, stuff like you saw at the beginning, some Halloween tunes stolen from my cable TV channel and such things. But I just had the weird thing. My sleeping habits are horrible, and I've been sleeping for about an hour maybe at night. I'll fall asleep sometime after midnight, and I'll sleep for about an hour maybe, and I'll wake up, and that's it. I'm awake until dawn. I can't fall back asleep until dawn comes for some reason. And tonight I had the weirdest dream during that hour of sleep that I got. I went to sleep about midnight, woke up at 1 a.m. after having this dream about David Allen from Gong. If you know, David Allen passed away a couple years ago, so it's kind of a sad dream. And very not typical of me. I generally don't have dreams that are very realistic and are things that could happen in real life, and the last few dreams I've had have been all things that were, potentially things that could happen in the real world. Now, David Allen's not with us anymore, but, there was nothing apart from that happened in this dream that wasn't, a potentially a true thing. And it was kind of a sad dream too. Maybe because David Allen, was always perceived by me and by a lot of people, I think, to be a really lovely guy. And I was visiting him in his home, and it appeared, now David Allen's originally from Australia, and as far as I know, I don't think he ever lived in the U.S. He came here plenty to play and stuff, but I was visiting him in a place that I guess if I were to attempt to place it somewhere, it looked like it was like in the southern U.S. Like he had a lot of property. You didn't see any neighbors around, so it's the kind of thing where these people live on an acre or more of property, and in a woodsy area, and you can't even see their nearest neighbors. There's a lot of property with each house, and there were 2 or 3 houses on this property that were a little old and run down, and one of them had a lot of windows, and you could see in the windows that it was just stuffed to the gills with stuff, almost like a hoarding situation. And I wasn't even sure if that was necessarily David's stuff or whether he bought the property and that house was like that. And he didn't live in that house. He lived in another house, which was also old, but not quite as stuffed on the property. And I was visiting him and talking to him, and yet he says that most of the time he doesn't necessarily sleep in the house, that he often falls asleep outside in a chair or even on a bicycle that he has there, which is very kind of weird and quirky, but probably not something that David Allen wouldn't have done in real life. But I was attempting to talk to him because I got the feeling that he was kind of sad and lonely. And I was trying to have like a serious conversation with him to get how he felt, and he would either like break out in song, and like I couldn't get a serious conversation going with him. He'd either break out in song, or he would like disappear, and I'd find him like on a another part of his property. He'd disappear around a tree or something, and then I'd start talking to him again, and then a neighbor would show up, and it was just incredibly frustrating because I was not able to have this kind of heavy, serious conversation with him that I got the feeling he was trying to avoid. So that's the dream. Kind of weird. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, except for I don't have a lot to speak about, so I'm just going to do a few vinyl pulls. And that I have that big stack behind me. That's not everything I have, obviously, and I have to figure out a way to get maybe some more. I know for instance that I've got like a whole bunch of Klaus Schulze together on that shelf, and maybe like Gary Burton stuff together, because I try to keep the artists together, so it's not like a total random thing, but when I'm pulling those things, I don't know what I'm pulling. But I also have in my various storage bins around here in this room, and also in my bedroom, I have many more LPs, so I think I may attempt to mix it up a little more, and get some of the things out of there, maybe. Like for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if you remember, I pulled the Keith Jarrett a while back. Well, I've got a whole stack of Keith Jarrett, for instance, in there, so it's very possible that I'll pull another Keith Jarrett album. So I might, I don't know if I should attempt to, once I pull an artist to pull out all the other albums I have by them, so I don't do a random pull of those albums, because I do take out the ones that I've already pulled out, so I don't select them again. I'm not sure exactly how to go about this, but I'm going to do one now. I'm going to just do another vinyl pull. Oh, now this is strange because I put this back in the pile. I was just talking about. I just talked about Ehrlich. Did I pull this? Or no? I was just. It's weird. I put it back on the shelf because I didn't do a random vinyl pull. I was talking about some Halloween listening, and Ehrlich was one of the albums that got on my listening this year. This is not an album prior to this year that I associated with Halloween. It definitely fits the mood. It's definitely eerie. But Carr mentioned it. And when Carr mentioned it, I did pull out and listen to Ehrlich again. And it was one of those things that like, oh yeah, this definitely fits the Halloween holiday mood. And if I continue to listen to it during the season, it could be a future Halloween listen. But it's weird that I would just pull this one out after just having shown it, as I was talking about Halloween listens, which, otherwise I wouldn't have put it back on the shelf. So I'm not going to say a lot more about it. It's one of my favorite albums by him. I pretty much, as odd as it is, I put it up there. It's very abstract. I put it up there amongst my favorite two albums by his, actually. Time Wind and this one. My two favorites, probably. So it's interesting. I'm not going to say a whole lot more because, I did just talk about it recently, so I'll do another poll. I saw a blue cover, so I went for it. And, in ECM again, so, I got a lot of ECM stuff back there. This is a classic. Terjeruiptel. Descender, I guess is how you pronounce this. One of my favorites of his. Not my absolute favorite, but yeah, it's definitely up there. I mean, After the Rain would be my very favorite of his. I bought this as a new release. So let me see. This was recorded in March '79. It came out in '80. I bought it in '80. At that point, I was, fairly new to Terjeruiptel and ECM. Probably only into them for about maybe 2 years, maybe not even quite 2 years at that point. And I like the band. It has my favorite drummer, John Christensen, my favorite drummer, and Palle Mikkelborg on keyboards and trumpet. And there's John on the bottom, Palle in the middle, and Terje Rypdal on top. And it's just a trio. There's no bass player. And Terje plays guitars and keyboards. And he's credited with flute on here, and I don't quite know where the flute is, though. I know this album really well, and I can't pick out where there's flute. This is a really good album of his, and it's a good, I think, starting place. A lot of people like the earlier stuff, which had more of a rock rhythm to it, like electric basses would hold down a very repetitive riff, and the drums would be more of a solid, steady beat. That a lot of people compared, and I could see it to the very late 60s, early 70s Miles Davis fusion stuff. But and a lot of people love that Terje Rypdal part of his, early years, the pre-76, about, from up until about 1975, he was doing that kind of thing. That's not my favorite stuff of his. I find that the rhythm section's too static. There's no dynamics. The basses I find too repetitive. This is more, typically what John Christensen is known for. He's going off on a flight of fancy. So where do I put this in his discography? This is probably my third favorite, I think. It's just pretty high up there. I think After the Rain would be number one, and the very first album from '78, which was probably the one that's recorded just before this, with another trio, with Miroslav Vitous and Jack DeJohnette and Terje Rypdal, being probably my number 2 album. This would probably be number 3. It's a fantastic album. Definitely fantastic album. If I could only have 3 Terje Rypdal albums, this would be one of them, I think. And I don't have a lot of Halloween stories. I got some Halloween stuff on my back shelf there. I got my book that I talked about. I don't know if you can see it. The Tales book that I spoke about. And I don't know if you can see that up on the shelf. I put it there just for the Halloweenness of it. And I'm going to do another vinyl pill because I'm not pressed for time so much. Oh, I got another ECM record. I guess I do have a lot of ECMs back there. It's by Britney Spears. It's an album that she made with Justin Bieber. Now, actually, I think this is the second album I bought by M. Hardweber. And easily in contention for my favorite album of his ever. Great cover by his late wife. The first actual recorded appearance of guitarist Bill Frisell as well, at least on an album that was distributed widely. This was really his first session. So this album actually introduced me to a lot of people. This might even have been the first place I heard Gary Burton, but I'm not sure. Gary Burton's all over ECM, and by the time this came out, this was recorded in January '79. Getting a lot of albums recorded around '79 here that I'm pulling, and came out in 1980. So in a way, it's very similar to the Terje Rypdal album, pretty much the same time period. I bought this, shortly after it came out as well. Maybe a little bit, months after it came out. I remember I had looked at it in the store a few times, and I had seen it listed in the ECM catalogs that they included at the time with most of their albums, where they list their various releases, and they would list the personnel and the instrumentation on there. and I would look at them while spinning these albums and decide, what kind of album am I in the mood for? A solo bass album, or a guitar, bass, drums trio, or a solo piano album, or whatever. And I don't think I necessarily bought this the first time that I looked at it, that I saw it, but it stayed in memory, and I knew I was going to pick up some Eberhard Weber, and I'm not sure if this was the first one, because Little Movements may have been the first one, which is more of a band thing, but I bought them the two close together. Little Movements was with Charlie Mariano and Rainier Bruninghaus's Colors Band, and John Marshall on drums, which is also a favorite of mine, of Eberhard Weber's. Actually, those two albums are up there, top three, definitely, of Eberhard Weber's. This is probably his most unique, which is why I kind of tend to put this at the top of the list. He has a few different things he does. Initially, he had the group thing where he would have, a band, a basic band, usually a quartet with his Colors Band that had drums and bass and keyboards and saxophones. And they were those tracks for that band would be written, even though he played all originals, in a very jazzish style. There would be a theme, and they would go off on improvisations, and people would have solos, saxophone solos, keyboard solos, bass solos, in the context of the music. And even though it didn't sound like mainstream jazz, it was very Eurocentric, and definitely had the colors of classical music in there. It was still very much in a kind of jazz context with the improvisation. Then he had his compositional albums, which this is one of, which were mainly composed. They weren't based as much on improvisation. There's a few little sections in here where I know Eberhard Weber has some space to take a solo at times, as does Gary Burton. Really not much on guitar from Bill Frisell. Most of what he's playing is written stuff, maybe with a few bars of improvisation here and there, as I remember. But I hesitate to say I think this is his most successful compositional album, because he has one called The Following Morning, which is really something as well. But to me, this is his most successful compositional album, or I want to say my favorite, but The Following Morning is so damn good as well. But it's just the combination of instruments. There's no real drums. There's a couple points, or actually one point in one of the long compositions, that one can hear like a bass drum type of thing make a carry in a key. I wouldn't say it's carrying a beat. It's more like it's very simple, but it's there a bit. But apart from that, there's no drums or percussion of any type. And there's Bonnie Herman and Norma Winstone doing wordless vocals, doing these beautiful harmonies that very much could have been played by wind instruments like soprano sax and flute. You could easily take their vocal lines and score them for something like an alto or soprano sax and flute. But obviously it takes on a slightly different nature because it is a voice blended. And I think they're overdubbed too. So there's, at times, probably at least 4 voices. I think they at least double their things. Sometimes more. Sometimes the voices are very thick at a couple points, and I'm sure there's 6 or 8 of them. Very expertly done. This was the first place where I heard Norma Winstone, and then I went and picked up an Azimuth album where she is a vocalist, again on ECM. Bonnie Herman also, but Bonnie Herman, I've only heard, I don't think I have any other albums with her on it. She's mainly, and I don't know nowadays, but for years was in a group called the Singers Unlimited, which was, I don't know if they were strictly a cappella, but they did a cappella jazz group, with men and women together. So a lot more in the traditional jazz sense. And I have seen her, I saw her on a German record label that wasn't ECM, that was fairly popular around the same time, 60s and 70s. That they did a lot of the same artists that recorded for ECM went over and recorded for this other German label as well. MPS, which stood for Most Perfect Sound, was the name of the label. And people like Charlie Mariano would record there. And the Singers Unlimited recorded there because there's a documentary on MPS, which I have on a DVD. And you do see Bonnie Herman in sitting with the Singers Unlimited. So there's two female vocalists, Eberhard Weber playing bass, Bill Frisell on guitar, and balalaika, which is I think it's a Greek traditional instrument, which he plays at one point, strums it, and Gary Burton on vibraphone and marimba. So most of the percussive layers of the music really come from the marimba, because it's got that very percussive wooden sound. And then the I got to listen to this now. And this amongst, someday I should do a video of my most listened to albums. This would be up there. The only disappointment with this album for me is the fact that I've listened to it so much. There's no surprises there anymore. I kind of wish I could scoop out that part of my memory of how many times I've listened to this and be less familiar with the music so I could really listen to it new. It took a little while to get into. It's not an immediate. I liked it immediately, but I didn't fully appreciate it, I think, immediately. It's a grower, and all my favorite albums pretty much were like that, though. If I get into them right off the bat, I might like them and go back to them in the future and listen to them, but they don't land in my favorites. I think it's something that I think those albums that you have to work at a little bit, or that are sophisticated enough to have layers going on that you don't appreciate at first, that end up becoming your favorites and the things that you can listen to. Because now I've been listening to this since 1980, so that's 500 years ago now. Yeah, this is a great album. I'm going to have to listen to this again. See, now that I pulled this out, I have to listen to this again. If you're adventurous and you can listen to music without drums, there's no wailing guitar solos. It's not like that. It's really about the music. Even the little bit of improvisation from the instruments that may be there really is kind of in service of the composition. And it's got the side one was a 17.5-minute piece called Quiet Departures, which is really the centerpiece of the whole album. For me, when I listen to it, it seems like it's over in 5 minutes, but it's 17.5 minutes. And then there's 3 shorter pieces that comprise the second side. This is a great album, and I think is this one? Yeah, this is one that I played a lot, and before the CD era, I was so concerned that it might go out of print someday and that I wouldn't have a pristine copy. I think I have another copy of it around here on vinyl that I never opened. I was waiting for this copy to get ragged enough to justify me opening the second vinyl copy that I bought. And thankfully along came the CD. And quiet music like this is best heard on CD. I don't care what anybody says. There's no drums here, and drums make a lot of oral noise. But when you're listening to classical music and things like this that don't have drums and distorted guitars and things like that, you really appreciate having a very, very quiet vinyl, or even better yet, CD. And I recall being quite pleasantly surprised when I did hear it on CD at how much better an experience it was, because it was no surface noise whatsoever. This music, this particular album, gets very, very quiet at times. Very quiet. Okay, so for a guy with nothing to say, I've gone on long enough. Halloween's still around. Things and people pop up all the time, So I'm going to go, and I'll be back much more before Halloween is finally around us, and You can say hello to Frankie, who's come to visit. And I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.